Today we're diving into the world of homeschooling in America, and it looks like choosing a state for homeschooling is kind of like picking a roller coaster, you know? Some of those super intense thrill rides and others are, well, more like a gentle spin around the park, all depending on the regulations.
That's a perfect way to put it. And it really highlights how those different rules reflect some pretty strong opinions about, well, about the role of government and parents when it comes to education. It's not just about the paperwork.
Right, it's about those fundamental beliefs. So let's break down this regulatory roller coaster, shall we?
Yeah.
You shared some info from scholars and socials about how states fit into three main categories: highly regulated, moderately regulated, and then there's the, what do they call it, the no rules, just right approach.
Yeah.
So where do things get really intense, like buckle your seatbelts intense?
Well, if you're looking for the homeschooling equivalent of a heart-stopping drop, you need detailed lesson plans approved by the state, quarterly reports like you're running a business, and maybe even evaluations by certified teachers. That's what families in places like New York or Pennsylvania are dealing with.
It's like having to file a flight plan every time you want to go to the grocery store.
Right. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got states like Texas or Alaska. You decide to homeschool, you don't have to tell anyone. There's no curriculum you have to follow, no hoops to jump through. It's really up to the family.
Wow, so it's like a total trust fall between families and the state. That's a huge difference, though, from super detailed plans to basically radio silence.
It is. And for some families, that freedom is really appealing. It lines up with the idea that parents know what's best for their kids and they should have the freedom to create the best education for them. But on the other hand, those stricter regulations, they're often about making sure that every single child is getting a good education no matter where they're learning. And that's a whole other discussion, right?
It's about finding that balance between freedom and oversight,
Yeah.
accountability.
Exactly. And it gets even more interesting when you look at the states in the middle. They're kind of like the log flume of homeschooling regulations, a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Give us an example. How do those in-between states approach things?
Sure. So take Florida, for example. They want you to let them know you're homeschooling, and they want to see a portfolio of what your child is learning every year, like a showcase of their work. But you have a lot more flexibility when it comes to what you're actually teaching. And then there's Ohio.
Yeah.
They care about how many hours you're teaching, and they want you to do some assessments, but they're not going to tell you how to teach.
So it's like they're setting some basic ground rules, but then they trust families to figure out the rest. Knowing all this must be so crucial for families who are thinking about homeschooling. You wouldn't want to start this journey without knowing the lay of the land.
Absolutely. It's like planning a road trip without checking the road conditions. A little preparation can make a world of difference. But like you said earlier, regulations are really just one piece of the puzzle.
Right, because let's face it, paperwork isn't most people's idea of an educational utopia. So what is it about homeschooling that gets people excited? What are the opportunities and advantages that draw families to this approach?
Okay, so we've talked about those regulatory roller coasters, but now I want to dive into what makes homeschooling so appealing in the first place. And Scholars and Socials really paints a picture, talking about tailoring education to a child's individual needs, their interests. Yeah, it's recognizing that education isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. With homeschooling, a child who's struggling with fractions, they're not stuck at the pace of the whole class. You can explore fractions through baking or music, even Minecraft, whatever gets them excited about learning.
I wish my math classes had involved Minecraft. But okay, so personalized learning, that's a big one. But I think what really struck me in Scholars and Socials was this emphasis on family bonds. It's not just about academics, it's bigger than that.
It becomes about weaving learning into everyday family life. More family meals together, conversations that go beyond how was school today. It's about exploring those passions together. That's got to be incredibly bonding.
It is. And I think for a lot of families, that's something they really crave, that kind of connection. But let's be real, it can't all be sunshine and roses right now. There are concerns about homeschooling too.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the one we hear most often, almost a cliche at this point, is socialization. People worry that homeschooled kids are isolated, missing out on important social skills.
Yeah, like the image is a kid surrounded by textbooks 247, right?
Right, but Scholars and Socials had some interesting counterarguments to that.
Yeah, they did. What about homeschool co-ops or community classes, sports teams? There are tons of ways for homeschooled kids to interact with others.
And those experiences can be incredibly valuable. Meaningful socialization isn't just about being around a bunch of kids your own age all day, right? It's about learning to connect with people from different backgrounds, building relationships, developing those social skills. And homeschooling can actually provide more opportunities for that kind of interaction.
Right. It's about the quality of the interactions, not just the quantity. And I think that's such an important distinction.
Absolutely. And scholars and socials actually mentioned a study that found homeschoolers were more likely to have participated in things like community service or volunteer work compared to traditionally schooled kids.
Wow, really?
Yeah, which suggests they're often very active and engaged members of the communities. It really challenges that stereotype.
It really does. Okay, so we've tackled socialization, but another big concern that comes up is academic rigor, right? Can homeschooling really provide that same level of challenge as traditional schools?
Absolutely. And honestly, in many cases, it can be even more rigorous because remember, you're not limited by a set curriculum or the resources of a particular school.
That's a good point. You can really tailor the level of challenge to each child.
Exactly. If they're excelling in a certain subject, you can accelerate their learning. If they're struggling, you can take the time to really delve into the material, work at their pace. You have the flexibility to create a truly customized education. Online courses, tutors, you name it.
It's like homeschooling parents become these master chefs, whipping up these incredible personalized learning menus. But what about after they graduate from their bespoke curriculum? What about college? I feel like there's this misconception that colleges won't take homeschoolers seriously.
You know, that's just not true. In fact, many colleges actively recruit homeschoolers. They see these students as independent learners, they're critical thinkers, and often they bring such a diverse range of experiences to the table. College admissions officers were saying homeschoolers often stood out because of their unique experiences, that self-directed learning those skills.
They're not just checking boxes, they're coming in with portfolios and real-world experiences.
Exactly. And a passion for learning that you don't always see.
It's like they've already had a taste of that independent learning that's so important for college success. So we've covered a lot, from those regulations to the benefits, the concerns. It seems like homeschooling really is this personalized journey.
It is. It's about families taking charge of their kids' education and making it work for them, for their values.
Their own path.
Yes, empowering kids to learn in a way that just feels right for them.
And I love that scholars and socials made this point. They said, choosing to homeschool isn't about saying no to education. It's about redefining what education can be.
Yes, it's pushing those boundaries, looking beyond the classroom.
So to wrap things up, I want to go back to that question we asked before. If you could build the perfect learning environment for your child, what would it look like?
What would you explore? What skills would you focus on?
Homeschooling might be that blank canvas you need to make it happen.
It's a chance to break free, be creative, find your own way.
And it's not about being perfect. It's about being involved and present for that learning journey, to take that leap and create their own adventures. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.